Changing our mindset as a leader is not always an easy thing to do. In theory, it's great. In theory, it's easy. But in reality, it's not, especially when you're stepping out of or trying to change your pattern of thinking negative thoughts, having negative inner dialogue, having self-doubt, operating in that place of anxiety. That's not always an easy thing to do. In this episode, I'm going to give you a couple simple steps that you can take in order to get out of the negative mindset, negative thinking, and moving into positive thinking, which moves us into the right direction. Let's fire it up. There is a physical axiom that says two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. So for example, if I were to be standing on a diving board and I were to dive into a pool, wherever my body goes, the water cannot be. My body is occupying a space that water cannot simultaneously occupy, cannot do it at the same time. Well, this is not just true in the physical sense. This axiom is also true when it comes to the emotional and mental sense. Here's what I mean by that. It is impossible for you to have a heart of gratitude and be operating in a spirit of anxiety at the same time. Anxiousness and gratitude, complaint and thankfulness do not occupy the same space in your head. You cannot be thinking negative thoughts and also thinking positive thoughts at the same time. It's either one or the other. They cannot occupy the same space at the same time. And what's difficult for us as leaders is, and by the way, this is not just true for leaders, it's true for everybody. We all have a default system, and this default system is what we tend to go back to on a regular basis. We just kind of fall into this pattern and we stay stuck in this pattern for a very long time. In fact, you'll stay there for life if you don't interrupt it, if you don't do something different about it. But what happens for a lot of leaders, specifically when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to worry and stress, is because we are caught up in so many things, because we have so many things going on. There's so many nuances to what we're doing in our companies. We're leading people. We have a lot to think about. We have a lot, if we're honest, to actually worry about or to be concerned about. What's very difficult for us is to get out of that pattern of thinking all about those things all at the same time and trying to think about them positively. In fact, there's this kind of weird, if you ever notice, there's this weird sort of human propensity to think the negative things before we think the positive things, to go to the negative place before we go to the positive place. And so what do we do as a leader, right? I don't want to be stuck in that thought process. I don't want to be stuck with the negative thoughts happening all the time. I don't want to be stuck with the negative inner dialogue. I don't want to be projecting and assuming that all these things are going on or they're going to go a certain way, because all that does is it just drains me of my energy, and it takes away, it erodes my ability to be able to focus on the things that I actually have the power to control. So what do you do in those moments? What do you do when you have those thoughts of anxiety, or those thoughts of fear, worry, doubt, there's tension, stress, or angst? What do you do? Well, the very first thing that we have to do in those moments is we have to stop and identify, what is this connected to? Step one is identification. What is it that I'm actually worrying about? Now, here's what you're going to find. We've talked about this in other episodes. Every single time, your anxiety, your stress, your tension, your angst, your situational depression, 100% of it will be connected to an outcome you're trying to control that you don't have the power to control. And so what we're doing in the very first moment is we're identifying, what is it that I'm trying to control that I can't control? As I've said before, self-control begins when trying to control what I can't control ends. Many of us are not operating in a spirit of self-control because we're spinning completely out of control, constantly trying to control what we can't control. And so it begins with identifying, what are the what are the things I can't control, my non-controllables. And then the second identification is, what is it that I actually can control? So what I'm doing is I'm forcing myself to take a deep breath and to pause for a moment. This is what runaway thoughts do. This is what negative thinking is. This is what anxiety is. It's just running. It's thoughts that are running wild. It's emotions that are hypersensitive and irregulated and out of control. So I'm forcing myself to slow down and identify. Here's what I'm trying to control that I can't control. Could be financial, could be a deal I'm working on in my company, could be employee issues, could be how people are perceiving me or I'm hoping they're perceiving me. It could be go all the way back to things at home, things in my marriage, things with my kids, my personal finances, time, etc. There's an outcome there that I'm trying to control, I can't control. I've got to identify what that is. Secondly, in that identification process is, what is it that I can control? What do I have the power in this moment to control? It's down to two things always, actions and attitude. You're going to hear this as a repeated theme in these conversations. Actions and attitude. That's what I have the power to control. Doing the next right thing in the next right way, doing it with a grateful heart. So step one is identification. Step two is interruption. We have to interrupt that. Just like if I'm standing on a diving board and I dive into the water, I've interrupted that pool with the object of my body. It is now in the water. I've interrupted that water. My body is occupying that space, right? That's what interruption does. I'm interrupting the negative thoughts. I'm pausing or stopping those negative thoughts by replacing them with something new, with something different, a different thought. One of the things that works great for me, and I have this conversation a lot with CEOs, a lot with executives, and I'll ask this question. I'm surprised by how many people don't do this or don't have this. But here's the question I ask. Do you have a gratitude list? A lot of them say, I think about things, but I don't necessarily have a list. Here's part of what the interruption looks like. If I've got something negative that I'm thinking, if there's something that I'm worried about, if there's something I'm anxious about, I have to be willing to replace that thought with something different, with a different thought. Now, this requires a lot of intentionality. I don't know what it is about us. There's something about us that really, I hate to use this word, but it's almost as if we enjoy marinating in that negative. I think we sense or feel some level of control in that place. But I'm interrupting that, right? I'm interrupting that, and I'm going to put another object there, another thought there. So what I do when I start to feel anxious, the very first thing I do, after I do the identification process, I start to interrupt it with my gratitude list. What am I grateful for in this moment? It's amazing to me. Like 60 seconds in, 90 seconds in, all of those things I was anxious about are gone. All the things that I was stressing about are put on hold. They're pushed away. And so in that interruption process, what I'm doing is I'm taking one thought that I'm having, replacing it with another thought. Why? Because those two thoughts can't occupy the same space at the same time. So identify, interrupt, whatever I'm thinking, I'm going to put that on pause. I'm going to interrupt it with something new, a new thought, a new process, my gratitude list. And number three is the redirect. I'm going to redirect. So what does that mean? I'm going to do something different than what I have done in the past. So instead of trying to control the outcome, instead of trying to manipulate, instead of trying to exaggerate, instead of trying to get what I want, I'm going to relinquish those things over to my Heavenly Father. I'm just going to take those things and say, Father, here are the things I used to do. What I used to do is worry about them, stress over them, interrupt my margin, interrupt my ability to be present at home with my wife and my kids, or my husband and my kids when the day's over. I'm going to now, my new redirect is, I'm just going to turn these things over to you. Now watch this. If I'm turning something over, it goes back to that axiom principle. If I'm turning something over, it means that I no longer have it. Right? So this is a cerebral process. It's a cerebral sort of front lobe decision I'm making to drop it, the art of relinquish. I'm letting it go and I'm turning it over. So those three steps help us to move from one mindset to another. Identify what I can't control, identify what I can, interrupt it by placing something else or putting something else in its place and thinking or focusing on those things, and then redirecting, doing something different than what I've done before. Over time, and I'm like over time, 60, 90, 100 days, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. Guess what happens? You now have a new default system. They call this neural plasticity. You have a new neural pathway, a new behavior, a new pattern based on the actions that you're taking now. So my prayer is that you will find a way to start interrupting these thoughts. Instead of hanging out there and marinating and spending time there, let's get a hold of it quickly by following these three steps. These are the steps that give us that self-awareness and move us into that place where we are thinking rightly. By the way, whatever we think, we declare. Whatever we declare, we believe. What we believe, we eventually become. This is our process to getting to that destination that we know God has for us.